Whether you love it or hate it, the transfer portal has become a huge part of college football. While some are going to use it as a reason to stop watching the sport, others think it's the most fascinating thing that has happened to the sport in quite some time. No longer is your favorite player safe, and it seems that just about anybody will enter the transfer portal nowadays. But while the transfer portal is crazy now, it was not this crazy a few years ago. In today's video, I want to take a look back at some of the transfers from the class of 2021. We're going to go through the top 10 guys who decided to enter their name in the portal, talk about where they ended up, and what their careers are up to now. I think it'll be a pretty fascinating video, and if you have an idea you want me to cover in my next one, be sure to let me know down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you love college football content, and be sure to go follow me on Instagram and shoot me your thoughts, shoot me a future video suggestion, and talk college football with me. Now let's talk about the 2021 transfer portal class 3 years later. The first guy I want to talk about is Tyrique Stevenson. Coming out of Miami Southridge High School, Stevenson was one of the top playmakers in the class of 2020, as he was an Army All-American, a 5-star recruit, and the second best corner in his class. He was expected to make a huge impact at whatever school he chose, and he eventually decided to sign with Georgia. He added to a loaded Georgia defense, and actually got an opportunity to play a little bit at Georgia. He ended up playing in 14 games as a freshman for the Bulldogs, and would make 13 tackles, had 1 sack, and 5 passes defended. He then returned for the 2020 season, and would play in all 10 of Georgia's games, in which he would end up with 4 starts. He finished the year with 34 tackles and 5 pass deflections, and decided to enter his name in the transfer portal. He ended up clocking in at the number 10 prospect in the portal, and decided to go with Miami. He decided to come back home, and in his first year with the Canes, he'd have a career-high 43 tackles, 4 pass deflections, and an interception. He could have went to the 2022 draft, but would instead come back for 1 more year, in which he was somewhat underwhelming, finishing with 25 tackles. He still declared for the 2023 NFL draft, where he ended up going in the second round with the 56th overall pick to the Chicago Bears. In his rookie year with the Bears, he ended up having a very solid season. He finished with 86 total tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and 4 interceptions. Stevenson was one of the better young defensive playmakers in the league, and has an extremely bright future with the Bears. You can definitely say that Stevenson lived up to his portal hype. At number 9, we have Tykee Smith. Coming out of Philadelphia, Smith was a part of the class of 2019 and was a two-way star in high school. As a senior, he ended up finishing with 26 tackles, an interception, a fumble recovery, and also led the team in terms of rushing on offense. Because of this, he was a high major player, but ultimately was only a 3-star. He decided to sign with West Virginia out of high school, choosing the Mountaineers over programs like Baylor, Duke, and Kansas. He'd end up having a really good first 2 years at West Virginia, as in his first season, he was one of the best freshman defensive backs in the country, finishing with 50 tackles and 2 interceptions. One of them went for a pick 6, and he would build upon his 2019 campaign with a solid 2020 season. He finished with 61 tackles and 5 pass deflections. Because of this, he was the number 9 player in the portal, and Georgia needed a new defensive back, so they decided to sign Smith. In his first year in 2021, he ended up missing the first half of the season due to injury, and was never quite able to really bounce back. In 2022, he ended up starting 4 games, finishing with 28 tackles. Obviously, he got a chance to win 2 national championships in those first 2 years, but he decided to come back in 2023. This would be his best season in college football, as he finished with 70 tackles with 2 pass deflections and 4 interceptions. He ended up being named a second-team All-American, and with him declaring for the 2024 NFL Draft, he slotted to go in the 3rd or 4th round. At number 8, we have an offensive tackle by the name of Wanya Morris. Coming out of Loganville, Georgia, Morris was always seen as a next-level offensive lineman, as at 6'6" and over 300 pounds, he was rated as a 5-star recruit according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. He had offers from every major program, but decided to go to Tennessee over the likes of LSU, Florida State, and Alabama. Wanya ended up playing right away for the Volunteers, and was actually a true freshman All-American for the Vols. He'd come back in 2020 and start 7 games there, and decided to capitalize on his momentum and would transfer over to Oklahoma. He was the number 8 player in the portal, and in 2021, he'd end up playing in 6 games as a backup. While it was a little bit deflating for him, he'd come back in 2022 and had a huge year. He started 8 games at right tackle and became a second-team All-Big 12 selection. He played in 37 games and decided to enter the 2023 NFL Draft. He'd end up getting taken in the 3rd round by the Chiefs, and would go at number pick 92 overall. He ended up having such a tremendous rookie year that he was actually named to the Pro Football Focus All-Rookie team, and his ceiling is ridiculously high in the NFL, and he's going to be there for quite some time. Up next at number 7, we have our first disappointment on the list. This was former big-time running back DeMarcus Bowman. Coming out of Lakeland High School in Florida, Bowman blew up as a sophomore and eventually became a 5-star recruit. He was ranked as high as the number 2 running back in the country and had an insane career. As a senior, he rushed for 1,500 yards and 24 touchdowns, which is why he was the Florida State Player of the Year and had offers from every school in the country. Many thought for sure that his 5,000 rushing yards would translate to college, but that's not how it would go. As a 5-star recruit, he signed with Clemson, and as a freshman, he only ran the ball 9 times for 32 yards. After the season was over, he decided to make his first transfer and would go to the Florida Gators. Many thought the Gators were loading up at the running back spot, but once again he got caught in a logjam and only finished with 81 yards. He had now flamed out of his second school and decided to transfer again. He was ranked the number 7 transfer in the country and decided to sign with UCF. Sadly, things have not gone well for Bowman, as he was finally eligible to play in 2023, finishing with 10 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown, while catching 2 passes out of the backfield. Bowman has not made it at any of the 3 schools he's attended, and will go down as one of the bigger disappointments in the class of 2019. At number 6, we have our third defensive back, and that is Derion Kendrick. He would end up growing up in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and coming from a prestigious area, he ended up becoming one of the better recruits in the country. He ended up playing both quarterback and wide receiver in high school, as in his senior year, he passed for 2,600 yards and 30 touchdowns, and also ran for 1,100 yards and 20 touchdowns. Because of that, he was the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of South Carolina, an Army All-American, and was wanted by every school in the country. He ended up choosing to go to Clemson, and this was a huge get for the Tigers. He arrived at Clemson in 2018 as a wide receiver, and during that first year, he caught 15 passes for 210 yards. Eventually in 2019, he would make the move to cornerback, as they desperately needed defensive backs, and he was good enough to play the position. He ended up earning the starting job, and would end up starting 15 games. Unfortunately, Kendrick would run into a little bit of trouble, as he was eventually dismissed from Clemson for disciplinary issues, and he was going to be one of the top gets in the portal. Kirby Smart decided to reach out to him, and Kendrick would end up going to Georgia. In his lone season with the Bulldogs, he would start in 15 games, had 4 interceptions, and 3 pass breakups. He became a second-team All-SEC player, and would end up declaring for the 2022 NFL Draft. Mostly for disciplinary reasons, he'd end up falling to the 6th round, where he went with a 212th overall pick to the Los Angeles Rams. Kendrick has shown flash, but overall in his 2 years in the NFL, he only has 46 tackles with 6 pass deflection. He's also gotten in a little bit of legal trouble, and it seems that Kendrick is one of those players with all the talent in the world, but just either couldn't put it all together or stay out of trouble. We are now into the top 5, and at number 5 is Mike Jones Jr. To be quite honest with you guys, I don't really remember a whole lot about him, so going back in time, he ended up playing 2 years at IMG Academy, and was seen as one of the top linebacker recruits in the entire country. He ended up being ranked as the number 15 outside linebacker in the country, and would eventually enroll at Clemson. As a freshman in 2018, he'd appear in garbage time, before he'd have a little bit of an expanded role in 2019. He ended up finishing with 18 tackles, 1 pass deflection, and a fumble, and after an okay 2020 season, he decided to enter his name into the portal. Apparently he was the 5th best player, as he eventually signed with LSU, and was expected to be the next great defensive player for the Tigers. In 2021, he ended up finishing with 34 tackles, 1 pass deflection, and 1 sack. That was alright. In 2022, he'd end up regressing, as he only finished with 20 tackles and failed to have either a pass deflection or a sack. He ended up starting 9 total games in 2 years at LSU, and while he was a team captain, he just never really lived up to the hype. It doesn't seem he even got a chance to play in the NFL, as while he was listed on the Falcons website, I don't think he ever made an active roster or has played a snap. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Looking back, I don't understand why he was ranked as a number 5 transfer, but he did not end up living up to the hype after all. At number 4, we had what in my opinion was the most explosive player in the portal in 2021, Wan'Dale Robinson. He was a guy I followed really closely coming out of high school, as he was Kentucky's Gatorade Football Player of the Year, the Mr. Football Player, and had an insane career. In total, he had nearly 9,000 yards with 118 offensive touchdowns. He's one of the biggest recruits in state history, and decided to spurn Kentucky to go to Nebraska. This was a huge deal at the time, and he'd end up playing right away at Nebraska. As a freshman, he caught 40 passes for 453 yards and 2 touchdowns, and would follow it up in 2020 with 51 catches for 461 yards and a touchdown. He was also dynamic in the open field, as he had nearly 500 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. While he was really good for Nebraska, everyone knew he could be even better in a different system. It's why he decided to go into the transfer portal, and would decide to go back home to Kentucky. In his lone season with Will Levis, he ended up catching 104 passes for 1,334 yards and 7 touchdowns. Because of this, he was named a second-team All-American and one of the best wide receivers in Kentucky football history. He entered his name into the 2022 NFL Draft and was taken with a 43rd overall pick in the 2nd round by the New York Giants. So far in 2 years with the Giants, he's gotten better each season. As a rookie, he played in 6 games, catching 23 passes for 200 yards and a touchdown, and this past year has somewhat enjoyed a breakout. he played in 15 games, catching 60 passes for 500 yards and a score. While he did become more productive, Wan'Dale hasn't put up elite stats yet, but I think his ceiling is ridiculously high, and he will only get better in time. He was definitely not a bust in the 2021 portal. At number 3, we have one of the biggest busts in recent memory in college football, Arik Gilbert. Coming out of high school, some believed he was the best tight end prospect to ever play on the football field, and while he was at Marietta High School, he really put up insane numbers. With Harrison Bailey as his quarterback, he caught over 105 passes for 1,860 yards and 15 touchdowns just as a senior. That is absolutely insane, and he was a beast on the football field. Every school in America wanted Arik, and he was ranked as the number 10 player overall. He eventually decided to sign with LSU, and this was a ginormous get for them. Gilbert would end up playing a lot in 2020, as LSU had a ton to lose from the 2019 team, and Gilbert would finish with 35 catches for 368 yards and 2 touchdowns. He decided to enter the portal in 2021, and his first school of choice was actually Florida. He was going to be with Dan Mullen for a few weeks, but then he decided to decommit from the Gators and flip to Georgia. This was a huge get for the Bulldogs, as they already had 5-star Darnell Washington, and incoming freshman Brock Bowers was also expected to play. Because of this and other things going on, Gilbert would barely see the field. He didn't play at all in 2021 after opting out, and then caught 1 touchdown pass in 2022. Going into 2023, he'd make one final pit stop as Matt Rhule would give him a chance at Nebraska. But unfortunately, he was arrested 2 times before the season even began, and he became one of the big focal stories going into the season. Gilbert never played it down for Nebraska, and I have absolutely no idea what he's up to now. And it's sad to see his fall from grace. I definitely hope the best for him, and then he gets his life back on track. Unfortunately though, Gilbert was a huge bust for being the number 3 player in the portal. I feel bad for the Tennessee Volunteers. 3 of the top 10 players in the portal were Tennessee transfers. At number 2, we had Eric Gray. Coming out of Memphis, Tennessee, Gray had a ridiculous amount of hype coming out of high school. He ended up being the top player in the state of Tennessee, and as a senior, he ran for 2,499 yards with 40 touchdowns. He had an insane 3,000 yards as a junior, and overall became the most hyped player from Tennessee since Jalen Hurd. Because of this, he was ranked as a top 100 player and the number 2 all-purpose back in the country, and decided to sign with Tennessee. The Volunteers were super pumped to have him, and as a freshman in 2019, he ran the ball for over 100 times with 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. In 2020, he'd end up having his breakout as he ran for nearly 800 yards and 4 touchdowns in a shortened 2020 season. Because of his stat line and the firing of Jeremy Pruitt, Eric Gray decided to look elsewhere and eventually transferred to Oklahoma after being the number 2 player in the portal. In his first year with the Sooners, he'd end up running for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that was pretty disappointing as he only started 6 games. He would return in 2022 though, and had an incredible season. He became a first-team All-Big 12 selection after running the ball 213 times for 1,300 yards and 11 scores. Gray was one of the most productive backs in college football in 2022, and in total had over 3,000 yards in his career. He decided to declare for the 2023 NFL Draft and was taken with the 172nd overall pick in the 5th round by the New York Giants. He was expected to be a backup, and in his first year in the NFL, he played in 13 games for the Giants, carrying the ball 17 times for 48 yards. He failed to score a touchdown, but he did at least see the field a little bit. He'll probably be a backup for the remainder of his career, and Gray lived up to the hype coming out of high school and made the NFL, so to me, he checked all the boxes. The final guy on the list we're going to talk about is Henry To'oTo'o. He's one of the most difficult names to pronounce in college football, but he was by far the most productive player to enter the portal. Coming out of De La Salle High School in Concord, California, To'oTo'o was one of the best linebackers in all of high school football, as he was ranked a 4-star player and the number 4 outside linebacker. He ended up playing both offense and defense, and decided to sign with Tennessee coming out of high school. In his first 2 years with the Volunteers, he'd start 22 games, and really did make an insane impact. He had 72 tackles in 2019, 76 in 2020, and accounted for 4 pass deflections, an interception, and even a pick 6. Because of that, he was the top player in the 2021 transfer portal, and it was no surprise when he decided to go to Alabama. He transferred to an arch rival, and Tennessee fans were not super thrilled about this one. To'oTo'o didn't care, as he wanted to get to the NFL, and had his best season in 2021. He finished with 111 tackles, 2 pass deflections, 4 sacks, and a fumble, and helped Alabama get all the way to the national championship game. Unfortunately, they would fall short, but because of this, he would decide to come back for the 2022 season and skip out on the NFL. He ended up being pretty productive, as he had 94 tackles with 2.5 sacks. Bama would end up missing the playoff. Tennessee got revenge against him. The Volunteers won in one of the most insane games of the decade, and while it was great for Vols fans, I'm sure To'oTo'o was just fine, as he ended up getting to the NFL. This past draft, he was taken with the 167th overall pick in the 5th round, and would go on to the Houston Texans. He'd join a super hyped up rookie class, And so far this year, To'oTo'o had a great season. He played in 15 games, registering 61 tackles, 1 fumble, and 2 pass deflections. He helped the Texans get to the playoffs, and his rookie season isn't done yet, and I think he has a very bright future in the NFL. So yeah, in today's video we took a look at the top 10 portal players from 2021, how they got there, where they went, and how they've done. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to leave a like, let me know down below, and let me know what topic I can cover next. Before you go, don't forget to also subscribe to the channel, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.